Well, it's wonderful to meet you. Thank you so much for taking a minute out today.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me on your show. I was really looking forward to this,
Yeah.
to be interviewed by you. I did a little bit of my research on, on my own to,
Yeah.
kind of see how your show is structured, and I really like the fact that you have all these different people from all walks of life, like on your show, like
Yeah.
a lot of creative people, a lot of people that are not only into because you are originally this was a jazz show, right? If I'm
I,
not
I have I have a jazz radio show, but I branched off and I have famous interviews. So it's like grabbing that whole other side of the world.
right. So
Yeah.
yeah, so you have like artists, creative people, business folks, like all these different people all together under one umbrella. And I
Yeah.
find that so amazing. And I when I had applied to be on your show, I was like, oh, I think I fit right in.
Yeah, absolutely. You certainly do. In fact, I'm getting into my 1 year of getting my first book published, and it was a volume of poems. So I
Oh,
understand.
wow.
Yeah,
That's
I
amazing.
yeah, it's cool. So I understand this world, and I have a soft spot in my heart for the poetry world. I always will. So that's why I'm really excited to get into your world and your writing. So to begin that journey, I want to know 5 years ago, this pandemic did so many things to change humanity, changed all the ways that we lived our lives. How did you get through that? How did it affect your writing and the way that you live life today?
That is such a great question. So during the pandemic, well, a little background about me. I'm actually a medical student, and I'm currently in medical school. So at that time, I was applying to medical school, but the world really seemed like, in all honesty, it felt like it was over. Like life as we know it would never be normal again. And I remember, I've always been into poetry, but I remember like using writing short stories, poetry as a form of like survival, both applying to medical school, dealing with just the way things became, quarantine. I think it was such a scary word at that time. It was like, oh my gosh, people are quarantining and everyone was just locked up in their homes, and TikTok became really big at that time. People, used like just anything as a form of escapism. So for me, that became like writing, poetry, journaling. And at that time, actually, is when I wanted to write something and I knew I wanted to publish something going forward. I just didn't know what. So I was doing a lot of reading. I was trying to get inspired by other people's works. I was really looking inward, trying to see what part of my life I could kind of romanticize a little bit, or I feel like I could share this with other people and make it a universal experience to where if someone read this, they could feel like, oh, I've experienced this once. I kind of know what you're going through. And so that's how I got into poetry in 2020. I remember I was writing drafts for my book, The Things We Never Said Out Loud, which is published this year. But that's when it started. It's been an ongoing project for the last 4 or 5 years, but that's when the first drafts were a thing. Like it was just some scribbles in a notebook, in a journal, and then from there the first drafts became like second drafts, third drafts, and then eventually I shortlisted the poems that I wrote in there and came up with my book.
So, talk to me a little bit about what your vision for the future is. You're a medical student, you're writing poetry. What's your dream, say 10 years from now? Where do you want to be?
So, the funny thing is, people in medicine, people in STEM, it feels like our lives are kind of like a rat race. It's so competitive and cutthroat, and it's kind of been drilled in us. It's like you need to become a doctor, you need to become, like a specialist, something like you're in the field, so you're aiming to become a physician or provider. But along the way, I feel like, we all had hobbies of some sorts. Like some of my friends, they enjoyed to like dancing. Some of my friends enjoy art. And I feel like, unfortunately, I think because it's just so rigorous and competitive that you have to let go of your hobbies and your passions, or you have to put it on like a back burner. And you keep telling yourself, like once I match or once I'm in residency, I could, go back into this and see what it's like. But at that time, when you're in a different phase of life, when you're in that phase, you have other things to worry about, and it just kind of gets left in the dust. And so what I wanted to do is, I have two passions. Medicine's always been a passion of mine. I've always known I wanted to be a doctor, but writing is also a passion of mine. And I knew that I wanted to keep writing with me. I wanted to use it, like I said, as a form of escapism, of like a mechanism of survival. I wanted to be able to write so I could, express myself. And I think it's so important to be able to express yourself in any field you're in. So I decided to continue that. So I was like, I'm going to publish a book. I'm going to keep studying, but I'm going to keep writing at the same time. And it's funny because I like to say, like, as I'm studying the human body, um, poetry is me studying the soul of the body.
Hmm.
So it's like I'm joining two parts of my brain, two parts of me together, and I'm going forward with that. So I thought that I shouldn't let my hobby or my other passion, the other part of me, just get left in the dust or be put on a back burner for, when I'm older, this is something I could do. I felt like I could do both at the same time. So my goal 5 to 10 years from now is to become, well, a physician, but also have more of my work out there, to be able to say that I am both a doctor and a poet, or a doctor and a writer, and be able to keep that going, keep that momentum going forward.
So take me back to your childhood. What were the foundational seeds that were planted that made you love poetry and writing and explore that kind of right side of your brain? But you have these left side dreams of getting into medicine. What were the motivators and seeds that were planted that are becoming who you are today?
So I come from an art family. My dad actually has his PhD in art and psychology, and my house is quite literally like a museum. Like, we have paintings strewn all over the place. We have statues, and and art was always something I grew up with. It's something that my family takes a lot of pride in. Growing up, I remember if there was any art galleries, my dad would take me. I've gone to his growing up too, seeing people excited to buy his artwork. He has a lot of paintings that he keeps in our house, and when people come to visit, he'll put them out, display them, and talk about them. And I think that that always inspired me and motivated me to know that art is in my blood. So, it's in my DNA because it comes from my family. And I was always fascinated by it. Unfortunately, I don't know how to draw and paint, but I felt like for me, art was through words and through writing and through self-expression, through poetry. So I think those were the foundational seeds, was seeing my father, just so excited about art, and seeing him do all these amazing paintings. And it's funny because he leads, I like to call it a double life. He's in the IT. So, he's working like a 9 to 5 in computer science, but at the same time, he didn't let go of, art for him. So he also paints, and he also draws, and he dabbles in art. And I use that as my inspiration, because I also want to lead a life like that, where I could professionally have a career where I'm in medicine, but also have art with me. And so those were my foundational seeds, going to all these different galleries, being surrounded by art, seeing my dad talk about art. And at the same time, for me, it was going to like Barnes and Nobles, or going to like a library, because for him, art is like paintings. For me, it's writing and poetry and books. So I would go to like a library or Barnes and Nobles with my parents all the time, and get excited about reading a new book, and then devour that book late at night when I was supposed to be in bed. I'm sitting there with my nightlight just reading through, because I just cannot stand the idea of like not knowing what happens in the end. So I'm just sitting there reading, reading, reading. And so those were my foundational seeds. I realized, like, at an early age, that I really enjoy reading, and I do want to write something of my own growing up or going forward.
So, who were some instrumental writers or poets that really swayed and captivated you early on?
Honestly, I really like classical authors. I think for poetry, it was Edgar Allan Poe. One of his poems is called The Raven. It really stuck with me growing up. I love the way he writes. It's so mysterious, it's dark, it's, very like it kind of gave me motivation for my book because mine is it's called The Things We Never Said Out Loud. It's like the unspoken, unsaid truths, things we hold over us like a sword, but never really say out loud. And I really like the way he writes because there's so much symbolism and you feel like you know what he's talking about, but the metaphors are so deep, it could mean many things. And I kind of wanted to use that as my inspiration for my book because, when you read my book for the first time, it seems very much like, oh, she's writing about either herself or an experience, but these are like confessions. So it's not all of them are my own, as in confessions I've heard from friends, from strangers that I romanticized and penned together. But you have to read it a couple times to understand that with life and love, things get messy, and sometimes you know the person that the person that you're reading about could be an anti-hero. Like it's not like as clear as like night and day. It's like it's messy. It's the person that you're reading about. You read one of my poems, you're like, oh well, that's a little crazy. Like, this is, not entirely normal. But then you realize, okay, well, this person might have been in love. And sometimes when you're in love, you tend to do things that are not entirely, I would say, completely, morally or ethically right. It's kind of a grayscale. So with his poems, Edgar Allan Poe, I know he likes to write about like the human experience and like it's dark, it's twisted, but it's human. And I think he was definitely one of the people I was reading a lot. And I love the way he writes, like his like the tone, like the imagery, it really transports you to where he wants you to be, like the state of mind he wants you in while you're reading his work.
So, do you have your book next to you? Do you have one that you can
I
read?
do. I
Awesome.
do.
Yeah. Do you have one earmarked that you could read?
Yes, I do. I'm going to read one of my favorites from here. It's called, can I read the whole thing?
Please.
Okay, yes. It's called I Bleed Honey. I thought I bled in crimson red, or maybe rust, deep dark misled, perhaps a shade of maroon instead. But when I met you in last June's light, the red turned into gold, the color of your eyes, the sound of my forbidden sighs. I looked to the heaven, bent my knees, whispered, let fate be kind to me. Little did I know, as the days faded, something started to change. A small prick of my finger, and the truth began to linger. I started bleeding in honey, the red long forgotten. My blood turned into the hue of your eyes. I pressed my finger to my lips, a honeyed kiss, and heedless of a wisdom said, I kissed the taste of you instead.
Wonderful. That's great. That's great. I mean, there's so many
Thank you. Thank you.
things, there's so many images floating around there. That's wonderful. So, what
Right.
was the first poem that you read to somebody? The first piece of writing you showed somebody, and you saw their reception and felt like, this makes sense. I need to keep doing this. Did you have a moment like that?
Yeah, I did. I think one of them was so basically what happened was I started off with um, an anonymous poetry Instagram account where this was before I published my book, and I would write a lot of little pieces and a lot of like couple liners. Sometimes they were a little longer, and I would post them on this Instagram page, and I would follow some close friends, but a lot of them were like strangers, people I didn't know. And I remember one of my friends, she like reached out to me and she was like, "Oh my God, I read what you wrote last week." And it was like a weekly thing. I would post like a lot. And it was just to get an idea of like what people like or get a feel for the crowd that I would be, publishing for. And so a friend of mine, she was like, I really like what you wrote last week. And it stuck with me. Like I screenshotted it and I have it on my phone just in case you decide that you want to delete it later on. And I think that really stuck with me because when I wrote it, I didn't think much of it. I just wrote it because it came to me. And I remember it was funny. It came to me while I was like studying and out of like nowhere, like studying like like the human body. All of a sudden I get this idea. I'm like, wait, I think I could write something right now. And I just pulled out my notebook and I wrote something really quick and I put it away and I didn't think much of it. And then, when I posted on that Instagram account, all of a sudden, this friend just was saying so many nice things that it really made me realize that I should keep going and I shouldn't worry about, like what will people say or if I write this, how will people feel or if if I publish this, what if people don't like it? What if my book or what if my writing doesn't get the attention that I want it to get? So yeah, there was a piece that I wrote that got I would say, especially when it's like close friends, it really means a lot when your own circle, sees you in a different light.
Yeah.
She was saying really nice things. She's like, "Wow, there is so much depth," and and whenever we hang out, we are always laughing and goofing off. But then I see you write something that's like very different than the way we've hung out in the past, and it makes me think like, "Wow, you have so much to say." So I think taking that forward, I thought like, okay, this is perfect. I'm gonna continue writing and continuing to like better, my writing and see what happens going forward.
The beauty of writing and all of the creative endeavors that you get into is that there's these people that we look up to like Poe. But in your life, who has been that inspiration that's allowed you to look at medicine, to look at poetry, to look at all of these things and to reach for the stars? Who is that inspiration, that hero for you?
Honestly, that's a great question. I would say there's a lot of people. I have a lot of mentors in medicine that I have looked up to that I hope that one day I could achieve what they have achieved. I see my parents, both, my mother's in art too. She was in fashion back in the day. So I see my parents and they're in art, they're not in medicine. They're not, in like the field that I'm in, but I see different people and I kind of turn them into my heroes. And it keeps changing. I don't have, I would say, one person. I feel like I have a bunch of people that I look up to. And it kind of makes sense for me because I feel like different people are so like people are so complex and then you look at people and you see that okay, this person's doing so well in this field and this person's doing so well in that field, and you kind of wish to take little parts of everyone and you're like, I just wish I could blend it all together and just drink that smoothie. So that's the way I feel. In entertainment and music, I really look up to like an artist like Taylor Swift. I love the way she writes about human experience and everything she has to say about her life, and it's just so beautifully written. She uses a lot of metaphors, a lot of beautiful metaphors, and it's still very mysterious enough to where you may know what she's talking about, but at the same time, it's an experience you may not have felt yet. And so I feel like she's written about almost every human emotion there probably is out there. So I don't think I have one specific hero. I think I have so many that I just like to look at these people and say like, even if I become maybe like 5% of who they are, I would consider myself successful.
So, if you could meet anybody on the planet right now that you find fascinating, whether they're a writer or somebody that's inspirational, who would you love to meet and talk to that might be the backbone for a good poem?
Um, Honestly, right now, and it's so funny because my answers keep changing, but I have been recently getting into Ruby Kaur a lot. She wrote Milk and Honey.
Yeah.
I would love to meet her in person. I think she's one person as of now I would really like to meet that I feel like I could get inspiration from her or, hope like, I don't know, maybe get her to read a poem and have her critique me and have her get like a perspective from her because her poetry is so unique that I feel like she says a lot in very little words, and it's a very difficult thing to do. Like her poems are like maybe 3, 4 lines, and within those 3, 4 lines, she says so much, and she doesn't. There's not entirely like, oh, she rhymes words or she's trying to fit it in to like the structure is just very malleable, but yet she does so much in those little stanzas, and I feel like that's something I wish I could have under my belt. Where if I write a poem that's like 3 lines long, I've encapsulated everything I wanted to say. I've encapsulated like a good metaphor within those 3, 4 lines. And that's not easy to do because right now I feel like I have to take a whole page to get to what I want to say. So I think she's someone I would like to meet and, just have like a meeting with and have her read my poems and tell her, how I feel and see what she has to say and see her perspective on my writing.
The one thing sometimes I felt like I would get long-winded, and I kind of created this thing where I really dove into haiku. And
Ooh,
I,
yeah.
I don't do it a lot. I mean, I do kind of I it's consistent, but I think those kinds of things are good. Do you ever dabble in shorter free verse kind of things that kind of really hone in on words and maximize them?
I've recently been getting into that as well because I realize like that type of writing, even though it's within the branch of like the umbrella of poetry is so different because it doesn't follow the same structure like a poet would,
Right.
like a poet, like a normal poem would. So yes, I have been getting into that, like free writing, haikus, just even like short stories that could fit into that branch. Like I was really dabbling into that. Reading my book, I realized that a, not a lot of people are into poetry. It's niche. It's a dying art. It's
Uh-huh.
like the Renaissance. That's the way I like to say it.
Yeah.
It's literally a Renaissance. So I do think that haiku and like all those different genres of poetry is so unique because I feel like it's more modern and it's something that like the generation that maybe doesn't really enjoy like sonnets or like the traditional poems, they would really enjoy more like free verse or like haiku and poems that are, formatted in like a form of like they're just telling like a short story.
Yeah, for sure. So let me ask you this. Of everything that you've done up to this point in your life, what are you the proudest of?
What am I the proudest of?
Yeah.
That's a great question. And I would say a couple of things. I think first was, starting medical school was a huge, prideful moment for me because it's something that I really wanted to do for like the longest in my life. And then getting to actually begin medical school was very, very, it felt like a fever dream. So in that, in that, hemisphere of my life, I would say beginning medical school. But after I published my book, through Barnes and Noble, I was able to get a couple celebrity shout outs from like people like Daniela Monet. And so I really, it felt like a fever dream in that way because I didn't think that something that I had really just, it was chicken scratch. I had scribbled in a notebook, and then as time went on, I decided to put it together, and now it's getting appreciation, and having it like on some of the shelves on Barnes and Noble really felt like a fever dream. I used to go to that store with my mom all the time,
Yeah.
buying books, and then seeing my own like couple copies there really felt like I was, it felt surreal. So there are a couple moments of my life that I felt very, very prideful. And I think, with medicine, it was getting into medical school. And then with my book, it's getting appreciation and seeing, people that I are friends with and strangers enjoy it and message me, oh, I really like this one. And, can you write more? Or why is this only like 30 pages? Do you have another, like, do you plan on writing another copy or like another version or something like that? And it felt very, very surreal because I never thought it would have gotten as far as it has currently.
So at the end of the day, everyone has a perception of you. Family,
But,
friends, everyone that gets your books, everyone that knows you in school, everyone in your life, but you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
you know, it's funny. I love your questions, by the way. There's
Thank
so
you.
much depth that I'm sitting here thinking of how to phrase it. I think my perception of me is, I know I'm a complicated person. I'm complex. I have varying shades of gray. I think that my own version of me is someone that is just not afraid to go after what I want. And I think, it keeps changing, to be honest. The version of me that's in medicine is so different than the version of me that writes poetry. The version of me that hangs out with my medical school friends is so different than the version of me that hangs out with like friends that are not in medicine or friends that are my writing friends. I've made a couple writing friends. So I think that regardless, the version that I see myself and I'm the most proud of myself is someone who doesn't give up, someone who's ambitious, but also incredibly empathetic, someone who is able to mix science and soul is the way I like to say it. Because, it's funny because hearing this in like history textbooks, like people back then either believed in science or they believed in God. There was a huge separation between science and church. And then as time went on, science and faith and religion were two different entities, but still you can believe in both, right?
Yeah.
So I like to see myself as someone who is like a firm believer in science, but also a firm believer in something like poetry, something that has soul in it, something that I can use, like, my poems as a coping mechanism for like the trials and tribulations I face in science. So I would say I see myself as someone who is ambitious, someone who doesn't give up, someone who works really hard to achieve their dreams.
So if anybody wants to pick up a copy of the things we never said out loud, where's the best place to go to do that?
So I would say the best place is on Barnes and Nobles, on the website. If you just look up my book, The Things We Never Said Out Loud by Hema Gupta, the first link that comes up is on Barnes and Nobles. You can get a paperback or you can get an ebook. And as of now, that's the only platform. I plan on making it available on like Amazon and on Ingram Sparks. But the crazy thing is like each different platform has its own trials and
Yeah.
tribulations you kind of have to face and put it together. And since this is like my very first poetry book I published, I'm taking my time with, making my website and eventually having my copies on there so people can easily navigate. But as of now, it's definitely through Barnes and Nobles.
Okay. I will put a link on the show notes. Emma, this is such a great story. Congratulations. Best of luck. It's great to meet you. Thank you so much for your story.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me on your show. I really